Okay, Jordan, the ACLJ is all over this massive campaign being rolled out by Planned Parenthood and these various clinics, but what can you tell us about these billboards?
Sure. So we actually saw this. I was flying back with my family, and my wife got an email from a various conservative outlet. Wasn't making a lot of news, showing these billboards that were being put up, and she sent it over to me and ended up writing about it for the ACLJ. Billboards being put up and endorsed by Planned Parenthood by an abortion clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. It's actually the largest abortion clinic in Ohio. It's called, kind of grossly, the clinic is called Preterm. And this is a clinic that has had some problems in the past. The last couple of years, a woman has died in the clinic receiving an abortion. That was a borderline late-term abortion, 19.4 weeks along is how they kind of described it, to keep it under the 20-week rules that come into play. But what is kind of most disturbing, Patrick, about this ad campaign, and of course they have free speech rights to use the money the way they want in these billboards, is the language they use about abortion directly. It's calling abortion a blessing or sacred, that it's good medicine, that it saves lives. So I'll start with the first two. When they start getting into the religious words, I think it goes to what we say, which sometimes is controversial, but I think it will make sense to people because these billboards put up by the abortionists themselves, that oftentimes those who are most involved in this industry, big abortion that we call it, this is kind of their religion. They worship at kind of an altar of abortion. So to them, it is sacred. It is a blessing. And so we can be put off by language like that, but I think it actually helps us to understand the mindset of these abortion providers, the people who make money off providing abortions. Second, it's trying to mislead women. We know the people who are out there who have gone through these procedures before and the negative effects it's had, not just by taking of the child's life, if you are pro-life and believe that, but that it's had on women long term because of the kind of feeling like, well, what would have happened if? So
Right.
that is why we expose this, Patrick. But there is another reason, and I'll let you interject now, but there's another reason. It's because pro-abortion groups and their lobbying groups and their legal groups are trying to force the pro-life pregnancy centers to actually refer people to abortions. This is a case heading all the way to the Supreme Court briefing right now that we're involved in.
Yep.
And so on the one hand, we respect their free speech rights, but they don't respect the pro-life free speech rights.
Well, and we're showing these billboards as we're talking here, and it is words like hope and sacred and good medicine, as you mentioned there. But referring to that Supreme Court case, now this, of course, is taking place with regards to the pro-abortion laws. What of this case? You mentioned it, but what of this case, and what of your efforts to basically protect and defend pro-life efforts?
So these are, what we're doing here is it involves pro-life pregnancy centers. Sometimes they're known as crisis pregnancy centers. These are individual nonprofit operations that exist for women to go to voluntarily who are not seeking an abortion, but are trying to figure out options to have the birth, to have the child, and it may be what's available to them support-wise, financially through government funding or through other organizations that provide support to single mothers, in one example, or to help with an adoption service program to get them set up in a program like that. So the goal of these centers is to preserve that human life that is growing inside the womb, and it's, of course, voluntary. The women who go there know that these are not abortion clinics, and that's not the information they're going to get. It doesn't stop them from getting the info there and then deciding later on to have an abortion if they want to. But what the pro-abortion groups want to do, Patrick, is to force these groups. It's happened in a number of states, California, Illinois, and we've seen it also in Washington state. So the cases have kind of been grouped together. They have tried to force these pro-life pregnancy centers to refer women to tell them where they can get an abortion. So a pro-life pregnancy center operating as a nonprofit would have to tell people under state law or be shut down based off the fines they'd have to pay, where to get an abortion. Not just that abortion is even an option, but actually where to go to get one.
Right.
And so this, again, and that it may even be free. So to go against completely the purpose of their free speech rights. So it's ultimately, you see, they will utilize their free speech rights. We have no issue with them. We can point out how absurd it is for them to say abortion is a blessing or abortion is sacred. we can point that out. But they have the right to put it up.
Well,
they, though, are not acting the same way with these groups. They don't treat we call it abortion distortion. And Patrick, the reason it's at the Supreme Court is because some courts have agreed with the pro-abortion industry that they always get treated differently than anyone else. They get treated different than hospitals. They have no regulations like that. They don't even have ambulatory care regulations at abortion clinics, yet they're performing invasive procedures where not just the child loses its life, but sometimes the mother as well.
And the initial billboards we mentioned again in Cleveland, Ohio, and again, they're the Republican side of things. They're trying to throw that candidate in there and get behind the right candidate as far as the midterms coming up and that Senate seat that's now available. So that's something to watch there. But I want to switch gears for just a second and talk about a couple of policy issues. I want to ask you about DACA legislation and the efforts by the president and the lawmakers this week. Of course, that major show of force on Tuesday by letting the public watch that negotiation at the roundtable. Of course, no surprise that different lawmakers walked away with different ideas on how to move forward. But today, conservative Republicans released their takeaway, and that included that wall flat out, period. But again, Jeff Flake, though, just a moment ago, said that we're at a deal on the more moderate side, that they're at a deal that they think should be on the table. So Republicans taking away different things. What does phase 2 look like in these DACA negotiations going forward? What do you think?
So for me, the key, Patrick, is that phase 1, and I think that even someone like a moderate like Jeff Flake would understand, is that the conservatives in the past who are concerned about border security have been burned too many times, and they have long memories on this, by granting legal status to anyone, which this would do, even though this is a smaller class of individuals who were brought here, as minors and grew up in the United States. So there's, I think, wide support to do something positive for this group through legislation, not executive actions and orders, but put it on the books as U.S. code. But at the same time, want to see border security enforced so there's not more kids brought here like this situation. So the question is, does phase 1 include some border security measures? I'm not sure that it would include the entire wall itself, as some of the most conservative members of Congress are saying must be included. But will the agreement include Democrats supporting increased border security measures? That's, I think, part 1 probably has to include that. Part 2 is then, I think you can look at the wall. You can look at more structural barriers, but also it's the chain migration with the family migration where, if one person becomes a citizen, then everybody down the line through the whole family can come into the country, ending that process and going back to, again, a process where people are decided on or not based off what they're bringing to the country and what the needs of the country are at the time. So that's flexible moving forward in the future. And then the other part of I think the second phase, if you will, and maybe it's in multiple phases, is the visa lottery program being phased out, because that is a real issue, a national security issue, because you've got a program where people can just randomly apply, make it through a lottery, and it's just like a lottery. They're not coming to America because they have a specific skill or because they know anyone here. They just got granted through this lottery program, and it's just not the kind of program you have when we face the national security and terror threats we face as a country today. Well,
and one last one, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but it will be interesting to see how the Democrats and the moderate Republicans define a wall when they put their proposal out there. But one last one. New today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions created that team to prosecute individuals who support the terrorist group Hezbollah. Of course, he's made huge strides in taking down MS-13 gang members, taking them off the streets. He's still, though, getting pressure from many GOP lawmakers, the Freedom Caucus, and the president to ratchet up the pressure on Hillary Clinton in those investigations. How much longer do you give Jeff Sessions as Attorney General?
I think with moves like today, where he took an issue which was really put forward by former DEA agents. They came forward. They said, we had this operation. It was called Operation Cassandra. It got shut down after 8 years by the Obama administration, right on the cusp of what they called these DEA agents who testified to Congress as of yesterday. They were ready to basically cripple and crush Hezbollah with the shutdown of their drug trafficking and money laundering operations that fund their terrorism. People sometimes forget they're involved in all those nefarious criminal activities as well. And it got shut down, what appears to be because of the Iranian nuclear negotiations. So when this came to light, the Attorney General said, I'm going to first do an investigation to see if there's enough information still out there where we could reopen this. or were, too many immunities given out, too many things changed? Is it too old of information? But if I believe that we can reopen it and restart it, utilizing what was done with Operation Cassandra, we will do that. And he put the resources into that, announced today, with this task force. And they say in the press statement from the Department of Justice, the first thing they're going to do is get the information from Operation Cassandra that was shut down by the Obama administration and see what they can pull from that. But they're not saying that's, if they can't move forward with that information, they're going to stop. This is a major investigation. I think when it comes to the Clinton side and some of the pay for play and the Clinton Foundation, listen, there's been a lot of discussion that is still under what this was under initially too, review before any kind of next step is taken. They review, because what the Department of Justice wants to do is say, okay, what kind of resources does it take, and could we actually bring potentially prosecutions? That's their job, not to just get info out to people, but ultimately to put people behind bars to bring criminal prosecutions. And so their initial review, it's pretty easy with Hezbollah. It's a little more difficult when you're looking at the Clinton info because of who was in control of the information before you got there at the Department of Justice. And so I think that, again, if you want to drain the swamp, it was a tough start for Attorney General Sessions, but today's action, and I think maybe it's a preview for future action, shows he's serious about going after not just the narco groups and gangs like MS-13, but also the international terror groups like Hezbollah. That's a good sign, and I hope the Attorney General continues more of that work. And if he does, I think he could be in this administration for much longer.
Okay, and I guess just simply not moving fast enough for some folks inside the Beltway. But Jordan Sekulow with the ACLJ, as always, thank you so much.
We can use your help. Call your cable subscriber and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call today.